Hidden Gems, episode 67, 30 minutes or less? Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm Cameron. Thanks for listening to our show.
Yes, the duo's back together again.
When is the last time it's been just you and me?
Well,
I think it's only one other time, right?
Like episode 14 or something when we reviewed, I remember the games, we reviewed Revolver.
Oh, yeah.
Resistor, which was not good, and Lord of the Rings Confrontation.
Absolutely so memorable.
Which is one of your favorite games of all time.
Yeah. Can we keep that going?
Can we keep the streak alive?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Love Jason. I love Bill. Obviously, we're usually a three-person podcast, but these two people episodes are kind of fun.
They are.
Just, you know, a little bit more bouncing back and forth off of each other.
Yeah.
Plus, we've just been sitting here catching up and talking.
I know. It's been great.
Fun. One of my best friends.
Love it. And two episodes in a row for me, which, you know, you're welcome, everybody.
Crazy.
You're welcome.
You're on the hook for at least two more, too. So
that's
we got
right.
Halloween around the corner and then Christmas.
Yeah. So I had one in March and then nothing until 3 weeks ago. Yeah. This is great.
You slacker.
All right. Well, obviously, everybody's favorite part of the show is where we just talk about
that's all
whatever we've been up to recently. So, you got something you want to share with the gang?
I do. I've got a couple of things. We've got the times. It's just the two of us.
Bill doesn't have three things this time.
Yeah, exactly. I've got two video games to talk about. I feel like I talk a lot about video games, and I will just say, just as a teaser, I can assure you that on my next banter, they won't be video games or graphic novels.
Oh.
I'm working on a couple of things. One will be a TV show, and one will actually be something around board games, but I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right.
So I'm going to save it for next episode, but I am going to talk about two video games today. But before I do that, I want to revisit something just real quickly. And I think you'll appreciate this because I know you played this game and you enjoyed it. And we talked about it last episode, actually. But we didn't review it, and we didn't talk about it a whole lot. And that's Freeze.
Okay.
So, you know, one of the things I think that's the most fun... There are a lot of things I love about this podcast, but I think one of the most interesting things about the podcast is that it allows us... I hesitate to say force because that sounds like a bad thing, but it allows us to play and review games that we might otherwise never play, right? Mm-hmm. And Freeze would be a perfect example of that. Mm-hmm. It's hard to find. I wouldn't have played it had it not been for our Spiel series. And I will say, while personally my thoughts haven't changed a lot on it, would still be a 3 for me.
Yeah.
Dude, Freeze has probably been the most played game around here.
Really?
In the last 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
My kids are obsessed with it.
Wow.
My wife texted me the other day, and she was like, hey, can you get Freeze? And I was like, no. And then why? I was like, why is my wife asking me this? And she's like, oh, yeah, my friend and her son want to buy it because they really like it.
What?
And then Bill took it with him to the beach weekend with his family. People are just digging Freeze. So I just, again... want to just throw a little bit of praise at Freeze as just like a really unique improv comedy game.
Yeah.
Where you're acting, you're role playing, people are trying to guess people's roles and locations, and it's your standard style party game, kind of like a Dixit style party game, but with acting.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It's not my kind of game, but just wanted to mention it. Because I think it's just kind of neat that we even got to play that.
Right.
And that, you know, amongst my family and people I know, it's like super popular right now, which I just thought was interesting. You know?
Dude, I love that you brought that up because I definitely feel like, you know, we do. A lot of the games that we focus on are these a little bit more, you know,
gamery games,
thinky, like type games, and that's great, right? I think there's a time and place for each of those, but I love that like sometimes the same people can also enjoy ones that are not, you know,
totally
as thinky in the same way, and just opens up this new space. There's actually a very similar type game that fits into the same genre that if folks out there haven't heard of it and you like those types of games, I think this one would be one to check out. And I've only played it a handful of times, but it's one of those games where very similarly, when you get going, everyone is especially with people that are very sort of creative and not very self-conscious, like everybody's just rolling in laughter.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And the game is called Fun Employed. Have you heard of Fun
I've
Employed?
heard of this game. Yeah. I've not played it, but I've heard of it.
I take it with me on every vacation just in case there's like people are kind of up for that. And what you do in Fun Employed is it's one of these ones where like one person's the runner and they're the person who's like running the interview. Okay. And everyone else, they get the title of a job basically. And everyone else will basically like see, okay, here's the job that I'm applying for. And your job is to get the other person to choose you as the person who gets the job. And the way that you're
selling yourself basically.
Yeah. But you get, I can't remember, you get some type of like wacky prompt.
Yeah.
Or you have like a bunch of cards. Yeah. That's what it is. It's kind of like the Cards Against Humanity style thing, but instead of just like picking a card and hand it to the person, you choose which one of your personas you want to go with that particular job. And then when it's your turn, you have to act out like in some, flamboyant way or whatever.
Like your motivation or your...
I'm trying to remember one of these things. It's like, like I don't know. You're a guy that's like really aspires to be a park ranger and you're applying for a banker job or something like that. Like it's real like weird matchups or whatever. And so you take on this persona of like what you think a park ranger guy would act like, who's trying to convince this person that you want to be a banker, whatever the scenario is. That's off the top of my head. The topics are way better than that and more interesting and more crazy. But that's I won't go on and on about it, but we've had some awkward and very, very funny moments. We played this game with my parents one time when I was like newly married and my wife was like getting integrated into our family, and my brother, we had this, I won't mention it because it's not appropriate for the podcast, but we still remember that moment where like my brother stepped up to the stage and gave this memorable performance, and it was, and in front of my parents, and it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're talking about this right now. This is so funny. So anyway, Fun Employed, it's a small game. You can probably, I don't know, get it for $15 or something like Target
or something, or on Amazon.
If you're on the Discord and you've heard of Fun Employed, definitely drop us a line about it. It's fun.
Well, there are a few games like this. There's a game that came out, I guess, it's probably been a few years now, but there's a game called But Wait, There's More.
Oh, okay.
But it's like, but wait, there's more, like infomercial, like you're trying to sell something.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same kind of idea, basically, where you're doing that. But, going back to what you were saying about just like funny scenarios and party games, we got Talia to play this with us, my wife, and she is not one to do this kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
But this deck of cards, it gives you different locations where you're acting out your roles.
Yeah.
And there were just some really funny ones that came up. One was like in the basement. And we're like, what would 4 people be doing in the basement?
Yeah.
And how are we going to order ourselves? Because basically you're acting in a hierarchy.
Yeah.
There'll be like person number 1, person number 2, all the way down number 4. And 4 is kind of like least important.
Right.
And 1 would be the most important.
But remember, sometimes you can be just an inanimate object.
Right,
if you choose to be.
But in the basement, who's the most important person? So like, but you can't talk about it ahead of time. So we're all kind of looking at each other like, what are we even going to do?
Yeah.
It just was hilarious. Just trying to figure out how to act that out. But yeah, I just thought it was worth mentioning. Not everything has to be Castles of Burgundy.
Right.
You know what I mean? We love those games. I like those games more than Freeze, but Freeze has a place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just thought it was fun to mention it.
Love it.
And I'm glad you got to mention Fun Employed. So
yeah, that was fun.
All right, the video game.
Oh, yeah.
All right. The first one I want to talk about, and you should actually pull this up and check this out on your computer.
Okay.
I tell people you should look at this, and I think this is a game that you really need to see it because it's its biggest selling point, honestly. It's a game called Bleak Sword DX. And basically, it's kind of a hack and slash Souls-like game, I guess, but it's done in like Atari-style graphics. Now, I know that's going to sound horrible, but it takes that Atari style look and makes it look really, really cool. Okay. It's the only way I can explain it.
It's
crazy.
2.5D.
Yeah, it's 2.5D. It's like you're on a square plane and it's slightly tilted, and there's environments. There's like buildings and trees and fire, but the fire, it moves. So it's
there's
like
a Z dimension.
There's a Z dimension to it, right? You're a stick guy. You look like a stick figure, but it's just so freaking cool on the screen.
Wild.
It is wild. Just the aesthetic I thought was really neat. Now, was the game good? Yes, it was good. So what's unique about Bleak Sword is the controls are simple. You've got a light attack, a heavy attack, and like a roll. But this is not a game where you can just go in swinging.
Okay.
You will die. You will die. And that's why I call it like Souls-like, because the combat is very intentional. You have to learn your enemy attack patterns, time your light, heavy attacks, when to roll, what angle to attack from to be successful. Because if you just start spamming X and swinging, you'll die. Okay. So despite its simplistic appearance, it's actually challenging. It will push you. And what's interesting about it too, like you said, it looks like a 3-dimensional plane, I guess. But enemies enter from the side.
Yeah.
And the longer you take, they'll just keep coming, right? Like they're on like a timer, I think.
Okay.
And
so
it's
if
like
you don't move forward.
after 25 seconds, another guy will come in from this side.
I see.
So you know they're coming, but it's the kind of game where if like 4 or 5 guys get on the screen with you, they're just going to mob you.
Okay.
Right? And so I just found it really fun. If you like challenging, difficult games with a cool aesthetic, I would check out Bleak Sword DX. It also has a couple of cool levels where you're riding a horse.
Okay.
And it's like scrolling left to right. And it looks like an old school handheld, crappy video game, basically. But it was just so fun. I could go on and on about it, but it's neat.
The TLDR on the website says, discover and destroy increasingly horrifying creatures across an oppressive lo-fi world. Wielding fierce weaponry and powerful magic in this pocket-sized action adventure.
Yeah. Wow. It's got boss fights, too.
Does pocket-sized mean it's not that long?
Yeah, I'd say it would take me like
after a little
5 to 7 hours.
Okay.
Something like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
It looks neat.
Bleak Sword DX. It was awesome.
Looks like it's on
I'm sure it's on
Microsoft, Steam,
I'm sure it's
and
on Steam, yeah.
Switch.
I played it on Switch, of course, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Cool. Awesome.
What do you got?
Yeah.
I'm bouncing it back over to you.
Yeah, so like 3 weekends ago, my wife and I and like 8 or 10 of our friends, something like that, went and had our first weekend away without kids, since we all recently had kids. We my wife and I had our daughter Nora almost a year ago. So that's fun. We're actually, I do have another banter thing,
that's
and
crazy.
I have to talk about it. I will wait until I'm done with this one. But so a few weeks ago, we all went on this like first weekend away without kids. We all gave our kids to loved ones and trusted them to keep our kids all weekend. And we went to the Grove Park Inn.
Oh, dude. Awesome hotel.
Up in Asheville. Incredible. I literally had never even seen a picture of it before I got there. And my mind was just continuously blown as we walked around that hotel.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly interject.
Yeah. 'Cause you're from that area.
I'm from Asheville. That is where, how should I say this? Because I was going to use a phrase and it sounds bad, but I mean, I guess it's true. That is where Talia and I's romance began.
Okay.
We I could say hooked up, but that just sounds like bad. But it's true. That's where she and I became a thing.
Okay.
Our college, which was right outside Asheville, had like a formal at the Grove Park.
Okay.
And we had known each other before that, but that's where we got together, so to speak. So
I know why you're hesitating, because it's a hotel and that's not
right.
The way that you got together.
Well, when you say hooked up, people think like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, let's,
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just kind of where it started for us. So.
Budding romance
On the dance floor, actually.
Oh, okay.
When I used to be able to cut a little rug.
Amazing. Well, I could totally see that, because there was a lot of hotel there, and we stayed in the main hall, I guess, like on the 3rd floor. So it was right above the main sort of center section of the building, not the wings.
Right.
And we got to eat at a couple of the restaurants that are on campus, which were amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good.
Totally. Yeah.
But one of the things that we got to do that weekend, and this is my thing really,
Tell me you went to the spa.
on our way. And actually, we tried to book the spa, and they were
It
all
books
they
like
were
a
all
year in
booked up.
advance. Yeah.
But before we got into town, before we got even to the hotel, we met our a couple of our friends in Black Mountain.
That's very close to where I grew up.
Yeah. So Black Mountain's really cool, cute little town. It's not very big at all. There's some really kind of fun, neat things to do there. And we've found a new one that we're going to be going back to, and that is Black Mountain Escape.
Oh, dude, awesome.
So have you been to this escape room?
I've been to several in Asheville, but I've not been in Black Mountain.
I think it's still relatively new. They have like 2 rooms. I think they're going on like 4. They're expanding a little bit. But we met the owner, John Brooks. He ran our game.
Yeah.
This guy is very serious about making incredible escape rooms. And I think very possibly this is the best escape room that I've ever been to. Yeah. Maybe there were some that had, I guess you might say, like more interesting or more challenging puzzles, but the puzzles in this one were pretty good. But the thing that made it so special, and John, if you're listening, hi, John, it's Cameron from that crazy group of people. I told you I would talk about you on the podcast. John is very theatrical himself.
That's important.
And from the like second you go in there, he's got his like vest on and he's like, being the magician's assistant for the room that we ran. And he did a magic trick, like a card trick before we even started the game. And that actually was the way that he started the game. It was one of these ones where you end up with the card that he means for you to have. And he's like, you just keep that. That's going to get you into the room. And we literally had to put it like a magnetic thing happened when you put it on the door to get into the room. And throughout the experience, I'm not going to give anything away, but like throughout the experience, he would enter back into the room as a character.
Those are the best ones.
And
when you have actors in the rooms.
And he was like, comedic stuff. He was like, he ran in with like chains around his wrists and everything. He was like, have you guys seen like a big thing of keys? Because we're like, what in the world are we going to do with 42 keys or whatever it was? This giant ball of keys. And he's like, cool. And he like goes into the room by himself. And then like seconds later, he's gone. Somehow he disappeared and got himself out. The handcuffs were on the floor, like this type of stuff. I hope I'm not giving away too much. But it was really funny. It was really involved. He didn't overdo it with giving too many clues. The puzzles were challenging, but not impossible. Like all that kind of stuff. And we had like 18 minutes left.
Oh, nice. So you finished in a lot of time.
But we're pretty seasoned as a group of 6 escape artists, I guess. So we've done a lot of escape rooms together, but it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
And I would say that if you're in Western North Carolina and you're in that area, you want to do an escape room, this is one to like, it's worth, I think, driving a little bit to go and do one of John's escape rooms. We're going to go back and do some of the others.
When I'll be in Asheville in a couple weeks, so I might go check it out because I love doing them. My cousins are really into them. It's been a while since we've done one together, but they used to travel around. They actually did one in Charlotte one time.
Okay.
And one of them got abducted. They were going into a room and they kidnapped one of them and separated them. So one of them was like tied down to a table or something. Oh, no. They had like paid actors, in the room, like kind of as part of the puzzle. And
wow,
they can be really cool experiences.
That's amazing. That's one of mine. The other one that I want to share, and I just thought about it as I started talking about this because I was thinking about my daughter Nora's birthday. It's kind of a special thing to share, but I think people in this audience probably more than a lot of folks would appreciate it. So my daughter's name is Eleanor. We spell it Elanor. And if you haven't already figured it out, she's named with the same name that Sam Gamgee gives his daughter at the end of The Lord of the Rings. He has a son, and he has this conversation with Frodo. He's like, Frodo, what do I do? I thought I was going to have a son. I was going to name him Frodo. It was going to be super easy to name my kid. And what do I do? And Frodo's like, well, why don't you give her a traditional female hobbit name, like a flower? You're married to Rosie,
right?
And he's like, no, none of the flowers in the Shire will do for my beautiful daughter. She's beyond all that. And he's like, okay, well, what about Eleanor, this flower from Lothlorien? It's this beautiful yellow flower. What about Eleanor? And he's like, great, that's what I'll do. So he takes Frodo's recommendation and names her Eleanor. And I'm like, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I'm naming my daughter Eleanor. Somehow I convinced my wife to let me let me name my daughter Eleanor.
That's awesome.
But we call her Nora. And my family members know that. And for my birthday, my sister-in-law found this event in Greenville, South Carolina, where they live, where it's a Hobbit festival.
Yeah.
So she bought me a ticket to go to this thing, and we're just like going to bring our whole family down there. We're going to stay with them for the weekend, visit, and we're going to go to this Hobbit festival. And the thing about it is it's not just like one of these like street things where you can just show up. You have to dress up.
Okay.
You can't get in if you're not in character.
Yeah.
So my wife, Casey, has been just working so hard to find just the right outfits for each of us.
Nice.
All of us. Casey, me, Owen, my 3-year-old, and Nora. And we're going to look amazing going to this Hobbit festival. And I don't even fully quite know what to expect, except for that everything is completely themed out and everyone there will be also dressed up.
That's awesome.
I think it's supposed to kind of emulate like Bilbo's birthday because it's on September the 22nd, which is Bilbo's birthday. My daughter's birthday is the 21st. So we almost got the same birthday as Frodo and Bilbo, but not quite. So that's this weekend.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So by the time this episode is released,
Do you know what y'all are being? Or is she
we're
keeping
just
it
all
secretive?
No,
are you doing hobbits? Or are you?
Yeah, we're just dressing up as hobbity as we possibly can.
Gotcha.
So there will be pictures. Don't worry.
That's awesome. I saw this thing. One of my dream trips one day, hopefully, is to go to New Zealand and see all the locations where they filmed, like Rohan and the Shire and Hobbiton and all that. But apparently, they do a 5K race in New Zealand through Hobbiton, like where they're all like dressed up in character, and it's like theme actors and stuff. And I'm like, dude, I want to do that one day. I would totally.
I've never done a 5K, but I would do that.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So that's my other thing. We're going there. We're leaving on Friday.
Dude, can't wait to hear about it. That's awesome.
It's going to be great. I do have a wig that I will be bringing. It's a red-headed wig, and my beard is very brown, so it kind of clashes and doesn't look realistic. So we'll see. Casey might make me take it off. But I was Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit version of Bilbo, for Halloween back when those movies came out years ago. So
nice.
All right. Well, we have an episode about.
Oh, I got one more.
Oh, you have one more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I threw in freeze just for funsies.
You said 2 games, so I thought that was the 2. Go ahead.
Yeah, since Bill isn't here to like talk about a whole bunch of stuff nobody cares about.
You just loaded up for yourself. Okay.
I'm just joking, Bill. I actually really enjoy Bill's banter. He makes me laugh every time. He just has all these really fun things to talk about.
We're going to have a big session for Jason when he gets back.
Yeah, Jason's in Iceland. Bill's at the beach. And so we're trying to get another episode before Halloween. So Cameron and I let's just knock it out.
Yeah.
So you get to hear us yapping all night, as my kids like to say. But I'm going to mention one more game really quick. It's a game called The Pedestrian. As it turns out, this was not intentional, but it's kind of funny it turned out this way. This game you also play as a stick character.
Okay.
But it's not a combat game. The Pedestrian is a puzzle game. I guess I'll start by describing the aesthetic because it's very unique too. Is your stick figure guy is moving throughout the world, running back and forth between signs. Okay. So like signs that might be on the wall in a factory, or like street signs if you're outside, signs on billboards and buildings. And so you're moving back and forth between these signs, trying to get somewhere. And that's all I'll say about that, because that's a spoiler if I told you any more. But your stick guy is trying to get to a final destination. And the way that you do this is that in each sign there are ladders and doors or whatever. But what makes the game interesting is you will often be in an area where you'll have multiple signs. And what you have to do is you can actually grab those signs and move them around so that doors will line up. And when they line up, you can move through the door. There's obviously a solution. So the way that you order the signs and going through the doors in the right order or going through the right door will enable you to escape, basically. Because you might need to go through this door to get a battery, which you then plug into this, which opens this, so that you get a cable and connect it over here. There's just a lot of that kind of like engineering going on in your head of like, okay, I go in here, now I pick this sign up, move it over here, now I come out through here, going through here. So that's the game.
I see. Okay.
Oh, you're looking at it.
I'm looking at it. Yeah. So you're a stick figure though?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'm looking at the wrong way. Is there another thing called the Pedestrian?
No, not that I'm aware of.
This looks like it has something to do with signs. Oh, I see. It's just like got this 3D thing, but you're looking at a sign.
Correct.
You're playing your dude running around on the sign.
On the signs. But it's interesting you should mention the background, because the background is just the background, but sometimes when you do things in the sign, it will cause things to happen in the background.
Okay.
That can allow you to access other signs that you need to escape, basically.
See. So you're the dude on the sign. You're not the first person view of the camera.
Well, you are the first person view of the camera, but you're controlling the guy on the signs.
Okay.
It's weird, and that's actually a really good segue, because the last thing I want to mention, and the main reason I'm mentioning in this game, the puzzles are fun, but I feel like what really causes a game to stand out is when it has that whoa moment, like The Witness does.
Yeah.
When you realize you can do something in The Witness.
Oh my God.
And you're like, what? So in the Pedestrian, when you're at the very end of the game, the last puzzle, or puzzles, I just can't say a lot about it because it'll spoil it.
Yeah.
But was
there's a whoa moment.
So cool.
Okay.
And I guess what I can say is kind of a teaser without being spoilery is it's really meta.
Okay.
And once I finally figured out what I was doing and what it was trying to get me to do, I was like, wow, this is one of the cleverest things I've seen in a puzzle game.
Yeah.
I wish I could say more about it. You just have to trust me. But it was really meta.
Okay.
And really mind-bendy. And when I solved it, because it took a while.
Yeah.
It's one of those that, like, you have to figure out, what is the game trying to do with me here?
Okay.
It was really satisfying.
And you played it on Switch?
I played it on Switch. Dude, it's so cool.
Dude.
It is so cool.
This looks like my type of game.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna play it with Casey. This is the type of thing that she and I love to do together. We did Myst.
Totally a game y'all can play together.
And like it looks like you can like co-solve it. Like you don't need to be both controlling it to enjoy playing together.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. But if you get to that final part right before the game ends, we should talk about that again.
Okay.
Because it was just, man, really neat stuff.
Sick.
The Pedestrian.
All right. Sweet.
Yeah. Now I'm done.
Okay. So we're talking about 30-minute or less ?
Correct.
Games.
Yep.
What should we even say about that? I mean, obviously the sort of question mark element of it is that these games are purportedly on the box,
right?
30 minutes or less.
That's what we went with. The
claim is there. We're going, as we play these games, like, can you?
Right.
Is that true?
Yep.
Are we definitely going to be able to play in 30 minutes or less?
Yep. The genesis of this episode was that because we knew we were going to be pushed for time with Jason going to Iceland, Bill being gone, you with limited time with your young kids. Yeah. I was like, what can we do? And I was like, you know what? Why don't we just do an episode where all the games say that they play in 30 minutes or less and see if that holds up, right? Because most gamers know, the box will lie.
Right.
It'll say 2 to 5 players, but it really doesn't play good at 2. Or it'll say it plays in 45 minutes. It plays in like 2 hours and 45 minutes, right? So,
or if you ask Ken, it's just us taking too long.
Right.
And maybe sometimes that's true.
Ken, our historian, will chime in on Discord and tell us how long we took on all of our plays.
Which is really useful when you're trying to assess things like this.
Yeah, when I said that, what was that name? Blue Skies was borderline filler game. He was like, actually, we played it in 1 hour and 45 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Foot in mouth.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, so that was the idea for this episode. So it's going to be fun to test that theory. So we're going to go over 3 games that say 30 minutes or less in the box, and we'll see if they're true to that.
Sweet.
But before we do that, we did have a cocktail tonight.
Yes.
And the cocktail I chose is in line with the theme. Mm-hmm. It's a cocktail that you can make really quickly. Mm-hmm. All right. It's
30 seconds or less?
Maybe. I mean, it's fast, right? So it's called the Kentucky Colonel.
Okay.
So basically all it is 2 ounces of bourbon and then half an ounce of Benedictine.
What is Benedictine?
It's a good question. So Benedictine is a liqueur, and it's kind of like a honey, herby type of liqueur. It's almost kind of like Jägermeister,
okay,
but not as overpowering.
So it basically turns. It's essentially a riff on an old fashioned. It
Correct.
sounds like, because you have this sort of herbal bittery sort of component along with a sweet component.
It's very
combined
similar
with
to an
bourbon.
old fashioned.
And you garnished it with a lemon slice,
A lemon slice. Okay. Yeah, there's no sugar. So
peel.
Old fashioned, you use simple syrup or sugar as a sweetener.
Right.
This doesn't have a sweetener.
Because it's a liqueur, you just use both.
So liqueur is kind of a natural sweetener, but it's not as strong. Really, this is just really augmenting the bourbon more than turning it into a whole nother drink.
Yeah, yeah. No, I feel that, because it definitely tasted like it's more than just bourbon with a lemon slice in there, or a bourbon and a little bit of sugar. Because I could start talking about cocktails, but the bitters play an important role. If you just sweeten the bourbon, it's actually not, it's kind of gross.
Yeah.
If you just put a sugar cube in with a little bit of bourbon, it's yucky.
Yep. My wife loves this drink. And again, it's super easy. You just put those two things in a mixture, you stir it with ice, and then you strain it.
That's great.
That's it. Very easy.
Enjoyable. Refreshing. Thank you.
Okay, last thing, folks. One more thing. This is big news. I'm super excited. So I have convinced Cameron to do a top 50 list.
Oh, yeah. Guys, if
there was much persuasion.
If you like top numbers of things of lists and you aren't on Patreon, boy, do I have a list.
You do.
Is it a good one? Who knows? We're going to start with my worst games. We're going to tell you why I like them.
Your worst games, your least favorite, or your least favorite of your most favorite.
That's true. My worst games are all the ones that I rated like a 1. And
right.
Who wants to listen to me talk about that? But this was just a hard-fought list to put together. I agonized. I told Chris like 10 times that I'm not good at making lists of things, but we worked together.
We did work together.
He walked around his room and was like, Cameron liked that one, Cameron liked that one, and he wrote them all down and sent them to me. I was like, okay, I can order these. I can at least do that.
That's it. I did a buddy assist, just to help you get started. Because if you don't log your plays on BGG and you don't own the games, I could see how it could be intimidating to just recall from memory. Like, how am I going to remember?
Oh, yeah.
I can just walk in here and look, but I just went through the room and I was like, okay, I think he liked that one. I think he liked that one. I just texted him all of them.
Especially when you have the recall of the lab mouse like I do. I'm so terrible, people, at remembering facts. It's really bad. I'm very bad at tests because I can't bring the exact thing that I need to remember to mind when it's just random facts. When it's synthesizing things, I'm pretty smart on those things. But when it's just so when you're trying to ask me about a game that I played, some of these games, it was
10 years ago.
10 years ago,
yeah.
We were playing them regularly. And I'm like, all right, what is that one? I'm looking them up on BGG. And I'm like, I don't recognize any of the things happening in these pictures, but I know that I vaguely remember enjoying that game.
Right, yeah.
So that's how bad my memory is. But we did it.
Yep,
okay,
we did it.
So we have this podcast. If you don't know, there's another podcast. It's only available to folks that are over on Patreon.
Yep.
So if you're a new listener to the show and you haven't checked out Patreon, it's Hidden Gems. It's patreon.com/Hidden Gems podcast. And we have a podcast called Hidden Gems Backstage. We talk about all sorts of stuff, but recently we've been doing these series where we talk about top 100 games.
We're going through our top 100 games, yeah.
And we talk about other stuff on the Backstage podcast from time to time. But right now, doing a lot of these top lists sort of things. So if you want to join up, you can join from anywhere from $2 all the way up to $15. If you do the 15, that's a gem miner. And what we do for those folks is we actually get their feedback on a game, let them choose a game that we're gonna review on the show. And
they review it with us.
And we talk about their thoughts.
They send us their pros and cons and final thoughts. And as a matter of fact, next episode, we're doing that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So
we recently decided that that's not a one time and done thing. It's more like a once a year thing. If you stay on with as a gem miner for more than a year,
you should do it keep again. Getting that benefit.
We do it again.
So we're going to be doing that one again. So I'm excited about that. And just for a little bit more detail, we'll be doing, since it's just the two of us, we'll be doing Cameron's 50 through 41.
Yep.
And so I don't get off sync with Jason and Bill. I'm actually a little bonus.
Ooh.
I'm going to do my 101 to 105.
Okay.
So
how
what are the
high does your list actually go?
It goes into like the 120s.
Okay.
And so you can see the games that just barely missed my top 100.
Nice.
Which are the ones that just missed the list.
That's a fun way to do that.
Yeah.
Cool. So there you go.
All right, is that enough yip yapping?
Should we talk about some games now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet. New York, London, Paris, Berlin, cities of the world, full to the brim with tourist attractions. In cities, you design and build each of the cities for yourself. Each round, you expand your city, positioning attractions close to each other, building big parks and placing terraces close to the water. As you build the city according to your vision, you find what should be the best spots to place tourists and score points. However, each turn you need to make choices, adjusting your plans according to the tiles drawn. Will you get the perfect tile? Who knows?
Oh, well done. I don't know how you do it, man.
Oh, I don't know. I don't either.
You're the only one that can do that and not get us in trouble.
Hopefully we didn't just get
I
in
remember
trouble.
one
That's fine.
time when you did that New Zealander accent.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if
Someone
it was in our
commented.
Gmail. Somebody emailed us like, or
I think
maybe
it
it
was
was on
in
our
Discord.
guild, and they were like, "You did that really well."
Like, good job
Yeah.
doing the New Zealand accent for an
It was
American.
like for an American, it was actually kind of believable, and I was like, "Okay, shoot."
oh man.
Yeah,
I try.
Well
I try.
done. We're trying to mix it up. It was fun.
right.
All right, game number 1: cities. I would like to emphasize that this is not the new cities. So there's a game that just recently has come out from Devere called Cities. This is not that game. Okay, this game is much older. You might also know that this game was reprinted as a game called Limes, which is very similar to Cities. I've not played it, but I read about it. But it's not exactly the same game. Okay, it's the predecessor to Limes, but they're similar. Okay, so Cities was designed in 2008, published by Z-Man Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 3,980. Designer of this game is Martin F. That's how he's listed on the box and on BGG, Martin F.
Wow.
He doesn't really have any other real significant designs. He does have one other game I've heard of, but I've never played, called Oklahoma Boomers. It's a game that I've wanted to try, but I don't own, but I have heard of that one. All right, brief rule summary for cities. And these should be pretty brief because, as we said, in theory, these games play in under 30 minutes. So I'll try to just hit the high points here. So cities is a tile lane game where you're putting tiles into your city to try to make your tourists as happy as possible. Okay? So the game components for cities, you have 24 tiles. Everybody has the exact same tiles, and they're numbered 1 to 24. And then you have 7 tourists, which are basically just 7 meeples. The tourists are important for scoring, but let's just set that aside for now. I'll talk about that at the end. Let's start with the tiles. So every tile has a certain makeup. Okay, so it's split into 4 quadrants, and you have 4 different types of terrain that can be on a tile. You can have water, you can have cafes or terraces. Those are red colored. You have attractions like buildings and skyscrapers, and those are yellow in color. And then you have parks, which are green. And those different landscape types will be in different distributions on the tiles. So, for example, you might have some tiles that have no water on them at all. Or you might have some tiles that have 2 water squares on them, and they might be orthogonally adjacent, or they might be diagonal to each other. And then you might have a green square, park square, and a yellow attraction square. They're all just kind of different, okay? But it's important to note that everybody's set of 24 tiles are identical. So my number 7 tile looks exactly like Cameron's number 7 tile. Okay? So what's going to happen is someone is randomly going to pull out 8 tiles from the stack face down, and that will leave that person with 16 face down tiles. And this person is going to be the caller. Okay? So that person will then take 3 tiles out of the stack randomly and announce them. So I might be like tile 7, 11, and 20. Everybody will then find those tiles and they'll position them in front of them. This will be your starting setup. Those tiles will touch corner to corner, however you want to arrange them. And it's important to remember that you are building a 4x4 city. Okay, so once you're done, you will have a 4x4 grid of tiles. You can't place in such a way that you would extend beyond that 4x4 dimension. Okay, so once everybody has their initial setup, the game is simple. The caller will draw the top tile off of their stack. Let's say it's tile 7. I'll say 7. Everybody will find 7, and then they will add it to their grid. They can rotate, turn the tile however they want. The only thing is that it has to be added in such a way that it is orthogonally adjacent to at least one previously placed tile, and it stays within that 4x4 confine. That's your turn. Mm-hmm. With one exception, the tourists. So I'm going to go to the tourist at the end. The tourist is something you do in addition to placing the tile. Let's just go through the tile placement first. Once all 16 tiles are placed, the game will score. The way that scoring is done is in the basic game, the yellow squares, so the attractions, you basically add up all of the squares that make up your connected yellow areas, and you get 1 point for every square in that large connected yellow blob, basically. Parks are similar. All the green squares that you manage to put next to each other to make up a large park area, you'll score 1 point per square in that green park. The cafes or the terraces are different in that what they want is the cafes want to be looking out across the water, right? It's like thematic, right? So he wants to be looking over the water. So what you do is from that cafe, going in an orthogonal direction in each way, you get points for every water space that you see from that terrace until it's interrupted by another structure, like a park or a building or something like that. Now, where it gets a little bit more interesting, I just talked about the scoring, but in order for your yellow areas, your attraction to score, your parks to score, or for a cafe to score, it has to have a tourist in it. Okay? So the way this works is that when you place a tile, you then have the option of doing one of three things. You either can add a tourist to that tile that you just placed. You can relocate a previously placed tourist on the board onto that tile you just placed. Or you can move a tourist that you previously placed one step orthogonally or diagonally onto another square adjacent. So it's like it's traveling or it's walking through the city. And the reason, again, you're doing that is that in order for an area to score, it has to have a tourist in it. If you have a big connected yellow area, attraction area, and it has no tourist in it, it won't score you points. So not only do you have to be thinking about how you place your tiles, but you also have to be thinking about how do I get tourists into these areas by the game end so that I can score them. Okay? And that's generally how you play cities. There's one variant with some advanced scoring that I won't go over now. I'm sure we'll talk about it in the review. That adds even more to that because sounds very basic, and it is, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, before we do that, since the theme of the episode is 30 minutes or less, we're going to put these games to the test. Okay? So, did you feel like in our plays of this and our experience that this game came in at the 30-minute or less mark?
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about this, and I was like, well, I guess we should have timed every game. So, maybe we'll get that data from Ken in the Discord when the episode comes out. And I know we're picking on Ken, but it's actually like pretty useful in the scenario
it's good data
that he does that. But I'm pretty sure that we know that it comes in at least at that. Maybe not with the teach, but
sure.
I think that's never implied.
I think we came in easily under 30 on these. I'm almost sure of that.
Yeah, it's fair enough to say that because I'm pretty sure we played the game 2 times in the normal fashion and 1 time with the variant in the course of the same evening, and we still played a different game that same night. Mm-hmm. So that's only an hour and a half, let's say, of gaming. So that feels about right. Yeah, like Ken obviously will back us up on that.
Yeah,
but yeah, so I think it definitely meets that, which is cool.
Totally agree. Yeah, this is one of those games. If you didn't pick up on it from the rules, it's very multiplayer solitaire-ish, but because of that, it's one of these games where everybody's acting at the same time. Yeah. Right? If I'm the caller, I draw a tile, everybody finds a tile, and then everybody's placing it at the same time. There's no downtime. Right. It's not like, okay, I got to wait for Cameron to place his tile, then Jason's going to place his tile. No, everybody's doing everything at the same time. And because of that, the game just moves faster.
Yeah.
You're always doing something and nothing is slowing you down, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's just kind of going at the same time. And so we can talk about multiplayer solitaire later. Some people can't stand that. For me, if it's a short game, like a filler game, I have no problem with that. It doesn't bother me. And like a 2.5 hour game, I don't like that. But this game, it just plays so fast. I would say we probably played it in like 20 minutes.
We talked about the whole difference, I think at one point, between tactics and strategy. And like strategy meaning like there is at least some element of you kind of have to watch what your neighbors are doing in order to have an advantage and understand where the game's going. That doesn't matter in this one. It's pure multiplayer solitaire.
You're doing your own thing.
You don't even need to look at anyone else's plate, the rest of the time, except for to maybe make yourself feel better or worse about yourself.
Right. Like, how in the world did he get that huge area?
Yeah. But this one, you're like, your decision is, okay, I'm going to pick up this tile. I have to place it. Where's the right location on the grid to place it? And then what sort of orientation in 90-degree turns
twist it?
To place it.
Yeah, and I will say, you may be saying to yourself, well, this sounds really simple. And it is. But I did like the addition of the tourists. If this game was just placing the tiles and then scoring everything on your board, it wouldn't be nearly as good as this little, but this little extra added wrinkle of having these tourists that you have to get on the board and in the right places, because you're going to have more than 7 areas that can score.
Yeah.
But you want to get your tourists into the best scoring areas, and it takes a little bit of planning and figuring out, okay, if I put this tile here, can I put him on this tile and then move him over to this other tile that I placed earlier that doesn't have a tourist on it? Because now this tile or that tile is kind of a good scoring opportunity for me, and I need to get somebody over there, right? And so you kind of have to plan that out in addition to where am I putting my tile, but then also what am I going to do with my tourist move, right? Which I thought was enough to make it interesting, right?
Yeah, I did think it was interesting that the way the game is set up, you're not always able to place a tourist. So we didn't talk about this, I think, in the rules, which is that you can only place a new tourist on the tile that you just placed.
Correct.
Right? Which is what makes it a bit limiting and what forces you to have to choose, when do I place a tourist versus when do I move a tourist to a different location. And I thought that was an interesting element of the game, because you almost do kind of want to get your tourists out there, because the risk of not getting them all out there is actually like the worst thing that you could do with them. Yeah,
you don't want them sitting on your table at the end of the game, that's for sure.
Right. You would rather them be at least somewhere where they can score 1 point, even if they couldn't be in a more ideal position where they could score more than that.
Yeah, and I like, too, the starting 3 tiles. One thing that's important to understand is when you put those starting 3 tiles out, tourists can't go on them.
Right.
So if you want to score anything on those in any way, you have to walk tourists onto those tiles, right? So you need to be planning for that, right? Yeah. If I'm going to use these tiles for some sort of scoring potential, how am I going to get tourists on there, right? So I just think the tourists were a nice touch. Not super complex, but it just gives you just one more little thing to think about that just doesn't make it just pure tile laying, right?
Yeah.
Which I think would not be as engaging.
Yeah.
I
agree.
I think we need to mention the variant. It's funny, when we played this with Bill one time, well, he played it a few times with us. That was that night we played it several times. And he was like, how much more could this really add? So basically the variant just increases the scoring complexity. So I'll go through it really quickly. Basically, everything is the same as before, with some exceptions, and that the yellow scoring, in addition to being a large blob, you get extra points for every cafe next to that yellow area. So not only are you trying to create large yellow areas, you're trying to now border them with red areas. The parks, likewise, want to be bordered by water. So you want a big park area, but you also want to try to surround it with as much water as possible. And then where it really gets tricky is the terraces or the cafes. They look out across water and parks. So you can get a really long line of water and parks. You can score a whole lot of points that way. But it just makes the game more complex.
Yeah.
Right? So what did you think about that variant? Did you like that?
I think I did, and not least because it's very enjoyably thematic.
It is thematic. That sounded confusing, but it was easy to remember because it makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. That's the kind of stuff that when a designer like adds something to a game, it makes it feel less pasted on.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just, okay, these are abstract sort of colors and they're sort of arbitrary or whatever.
Right.
And like now it feels like something that makes sense. And so that's almost more enjoyable. But
and you don't have to struggle to remember it.
Right.
If it makes sense, it's easy to remember, right?
It's the attractions and the shops go together, right? Which is what you would want.
The attractions want to be near the shops because the people come from the shops,
and you want to like have a thing.
Go walk to that cathedral, right?
Or if you're going to be at a cafe, you would want some nice scenery. It makes the cafe experience more enjoyable. It's
exactly.
I love it. Theme,
right? Totally.
So that was pretty cool. As far as like enjoyment of the scoring mechanism, I mean, it definitely makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and harder.
Yeah. Right? And I think that when it's kind of like who are you playing with, right? If your group is a little bit more used to playing some of the more technical games, and like this, maybe you don't like ramp up to it. Maybe you just throw them right into the advanced situation. And I think like probably like if you had told us that was just how the game was played, I think our group, we probably would have been fine.
Just fine. Yeah.
And maybe not, maybe Bill wouldn't have been thinking what he was thinking before we played that version. Cause I don't remember what his position was after we played the advanced version. I almost kind of wish maybe he'll chime in on the Discord and tell us what he thought as well.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it changed his opinion once we actually did it.
Yeah. And I think I do remember him saying, I know for sure he said, I don't know if I'm going to like this because it just seemed like more complexity for complexity's sake. But after we finished, he was like, wow, that really changed it. And he was like, I think I liked it better because it just does give you a lot more to think about.
We were wondering if the distribution of the scores would change between the regular version and the advanced version. And I think what we found is that it actually did. It made it more difficult enough that you had to be a more skillful, careful planner in order to make it happen, where you're getting the compounded sort of advanced points versus just the sort of basic points. I found myself, I think I remember like getting like a little bit overwhelmed, and I didn't score as many points in the advanced fashion as I meant to, because I think I got like super fixated on like getting the shops and the cafes next to one another, and I forgot about the parks and the water thing and like all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep in your head. And actually, I guess leading into cons a little bit, because we've been talking about some good things. This is such a minor con, but I will say I do think in the advanced scoring variant, at least in my opinion, this is my opinion, it did kind of make the cafes way, way more important.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Everything is about the cafes at that point.
Like the yellow and the green areas, if you can make a big one in each, that's great. But I think everybody was trying to make those really long lines of sight across water and greens.
You could turn each one of them into like 5-6 points.
You can score a crap ton of points, right? So it kind of all becomes about terraces at that point, which maybe isn't necessarily bad, but I don't know. It takes away from the yellow and green areas a little bit, which makes you maybe thinking a little bit more one-dimensionally.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something to consider, I think.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Was there anything else you didn't care for in this game? Or
I mean, anytime you're playing a game that's entirely cardboard chits, like, it's a little bit like, eh.
Yeah.
But, you know,
I think we have to talk
not
about
everyone can have like a Castles of Burgundy advanced super $200 version like you have in like every game. But it would have added something, I think.
It came out in 2008,
right?
And it looks like it, right? I mean, this game looks bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ugly. The art, it looks like
almost like they like went on Google Images and just like
that's what I was
did like the posterize effect in Photoshop on everything.
It looks like Photoshop. It just, I guess the game I would compare it to would be like Food Chain Magnate. That's what the tiles look like. They look like prototypes,
right?
So for some people. And I get this. It's fine. I like a game to look good, but if it doesn't and the game is good, it doesn't bother me. But I am sure some people will look at this and be like, I'm not playing that.
Right.
Because it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Okay? And you should know that.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder if it was the sort of thing that like they were like, we'll invest the extra money once it sort of picks up and we need to do a reprint, and then it never picked up and this game got lost or whatever.
But it did get reprinted.
Did it?
Well, Limes. So I'll talk about that at the end about
Okay.
where you can find it. And I think it addresses some of these issues.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Anything else?
What do you think? Should we go and just do final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
Okay. So I'll begin by saying I'm just a sucker for these kind of games. I really am. And examples of this would be Fits, which we recently reviewed, and Take It Easy. Mm-hmm. These games are very similar to that. Take It Easy especially. It even has that kind of similar thing of like the caller who draws the tile. Everybody finds that matching tile. Everybody places it as in. Very, very, very similar.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just inclined to like these kind of games. And I like this game. Okay. But when you have a lot of games like that you like, you can't help but compare them, right? Avenue would be another one. We've never reviewed on this channel. It got rethemed as like Kokoro or something like that. I like games like this. This game is good. I'm giving it a 4. I like it. I'm going to keep it. I think it's got a place. I would pull it out and play it occasionally. But the reason I'm not going to rate it higher is it's just not as good as those games.
Okay.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think Take It Easy and Fits especially are just kind of like next tier for me, while this one isn't quite there. But I will say that it's different enough from those games, especially with that tourist placement mechanic, that I like this game. And so because of that, I'm going to keep it. It plays well under 30 minutes, I think. It's enjoyable. It's light. It's breezy. You can play it easier mode, like you mentioned, Cameron, for a more casual crowd. You can play it more hardcore for a more hardcore crowd. So I think it has a place. So Cities, I'm going to give it a 4.
All right. So my final thoughts are, I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's because I haven't been playing quite as many games. And when I have, it's been, some of these more serious titles that are longer plays and stuff like that. But I feel like earlier on in this podcast, we talked a lot about the concept of filler games.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe it's because back then we were getting like a larger group of people together at a time. And the concept of a filler game was like more important. We saw more of these filler games coming to the table. And I feel like it's an important thing to talk about in a podcast episode about games that are 30 minutes or less, because we would have said that's the definition of a filler game. Right. And I feel like this fits that mold like pretty well.
Yeah.
It's not a huge lift. It's not a huge teach. Right. And you can get through it. It's pretty like accessible, let's say, from a complexity standpoint. And I think even if you are playing at the sort of advanced level, like you might not perform as well as others if you're not a quick learner, let's say, but
or spatially challenged.
Correct.
I mean, if you're not good at like spatial things, this game you won't do well.
Right. But in terms of difficulty, it doesn't rise to the level of like half of the games that we play in terms of like
anybody
the
can play this
full length feature games, right?
Yeah.
So anybody can play this, and so I like that, and I do feel like because the time commitment is not intimidating, it's so much easier to say I like it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
That was what I came away with from it, because it was. I mean, I was thinking about, we finished the first game. I was like, all right. Not like, do you want to run it back? Because like we had to run it back because we were preparing for the podcast, but like it didn't feel like a big lift to run it back.
No.
I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah.
And that's what you want, Totally. That's what you want in a game like this that's meant to sort of play this role. And honestly, I kind of wish that there were more games that you could say that about, right? Where it was just easy to be like, sure, we'll do it again. That's fine. Yeah. Cool.
Easy to reset everything.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think this is an easy 4. I know we always like hate to be like on the same score on things, but we had a good time with it. We It was casual. We were having side conversations while we were playing it. And like, it's just hitting all the right notes, for that filler game status for us. So, 4.
Yeah. There's something about this game, like the Take It Easy, the Fits, this game. There's an energy at the table that happens in these games, and I can't quite explain it. But
it's like what you want to happen at game night.
That shared joy and suffering when you don't get the tile you want, and then the elation when you do get the tile you want, and everybody's just kind of like feeding off each other. It's just like a good thing.
Well, you even had some of those moments where it was like, because of however, each individual person's multiplayer solitaire was happening, it was like a tile would come out and be like, yes, that's what I need. And everyone else goes, ugh.
Yeah, that's just fun.
Yeah, that's fun.
We talked about that a lot in our Fitz review. And I'm just finding I enjoy games like that more and more because, hey, I like to win as much as anybody and I like to cut people's legs out. But you don't need, not every game you need to be like trying to crush your opponent.
Right.
Sometimes it's just fun to suffer and rejoice together corporately, even if you're kind of all doing your own thing. And it's just fun. I just feel like the mood always comes up when we play games like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, cities. Can you get it? Where can you get it?
You can. So I got some good news. So there are copies of Cities available at Noble Knight Games. So Noble Knight are our partners, our sponsors. We appreciate them very much. They do have copies available pretty cheap. So if you want to try out Cities, you can get it from them. And if you would, we would appreciate it if you would use our discount code. That is Summer Gems 24. I can confirm that is running through October the 10th. Of 2024, so that code is still active.
Nice.
You can get 10% off of your order. There are also 6 copies on the BGG marketplace as well that are pretty cheap. And then I will also mention this game was reprinted as Limes. I read about it on BGG quite a bit, and the game is very, very similar, but the designer made quite a few changes about how scorings take place, how things are laid out on the tiles, and so while it's basically the same game, he just tweaked some things that, in his opinion, makes the game a better experience. I've not played it. It does look better. Limes is slightly higher rated than Cities, so you may just want to jump right to Limes.
Nice.
If this sounded interesting to you, because in theory, I guess it's a better game, but we can only speak to Cities.
Okay.
But just, take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. And, okay, so I have 2 comments to make about this. One, I bet doing a Limes review would be a fun backstage episode.
Yeah, totally.
Right? Because we gave it high marks, but the way, the sort of new version of it is this other thing, but we're probably not going to revisit it on the show if we're real. So maybe a fun backstage thing to do. All right. Well, those are our thoughts on Cities. The scene is China in the 1st century BC. The great emperor Shi Huangti has unified the formerly warring Chinese provinces under his stern rule. He has ordered the building of a great wall to protect his fledgling empire from raiding Mongols. The players take the roles of regional nobles, eager to impress the fearsome ruler. Whichever player contributes the most to building and manning the Great Wall will earn the emperor's favor. Will you use honor and ingenuity to build the longest wall section, or guile and trickery to disrupt your opponent's progress? That's it.
So peaceful. This must be a really peaceful game.
Yeah, it's definitely not about war and trickery.
Where everybody gets along and doesn't hate each other.
Yeah. Wrong.
Great Wall of China. Published in 2006. Man, we're going back here. 2006 and 2008. I was in medical school.
Wow.
That's a long time ago, man. Now, getting old. Published by Fantasy Flight Games. That might surprise you, but this is back when Fantasy Flight was doing that silver line of games, so they were like smaller box and not these really big, huge dungeon crawl monstrosities that they kind of are more famous for. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 4,073, and designer, the great Reiner Knizia.
Oh, yeah.
As you know, we love on this podcast. We played a lot of his games on here, reviewed a lot of them.
Do we know how many we're at now?
I don't know, but I would bet we're probably in the 10 to 12 range if I had to guess.
Okay. Andrew, we need a stat.
Help us. Andrew is our historian. Statistician, maybe that's more appropriate. Yeah. All right. Brief rule summary for Great Wall of China. Great Wall of China is a competitive card playing game where the players are going to be adding cards to wall segments, basically, in the construction of the Great Wall of China. Okay, so all the cards in your deck are basically wall segments. Your cards have different abilities or things that they do, but basically you're constructing the wall together. Okay, you're doing this corporately. So what this looks like, or the way this works is that you're going to have a cup of victory point chits. Okay. And you're going to randomly draw out 2 chits at a time, and you're going to place them on the table, and you're going to leave enough space to the right of those 2 chits for players to lay cards. So let's say in a 4-player game, a 4 or a 5-player game, you're going to have 4 rows. Okay, so you're going to have 2 chits per row. They can go anywhere from 2 points up to 7 points. So for one row, you might have a 4-point chit and a 5-point chit. Another row, you might have 2 3s. Then another row, you might have a 7 and a 2. We'll get to that in a minute. That's where it gets really interesting. But you get the idea. Okay, so that's going to be laid out on the table. That's the display. And then everybody is going to start with the same deck of 20 cards. Okay, everybody's deck is identical. But to start the game, you're going to shuffle that, and you're going to draw 5 random cards. So everybody, while their decks are the same, everybody's going to have a different starting hand of cards that's known only to them. I'll talk about the cards and what they do at the very end. Let's just talk about what a turn looks like. So the first thing that you're going to do on your turn is you're going to assess the walls to see if you are controlling any of the walls. And basically what that means is, do I have the most points of influence exerted upon one or more wall segments? If you do, you will get a victory point chit from that wall. But I'm going to stop there because I'm going to do that at the end too. Let me talk about what a turn looks like, and then I'll talk about how you resolve that. But just understand that to determine whether or not you get victory points for a wall segment, that is the first thing that happens on your turn. So before you play cards. So basically, in order for you to score a wall segment, you have to play cards. It has to come all the way back around to you, and you still have to be in control of that wall segment. Okay, that's the main thing you need to understand. Okay, so on your turn, what do you do? In classic Knizia style, I love this, man. You have 2 very simple options on your turn, but very challenging options. You can either draw a card, and you might say, well, that doesn't sound hard, but when to draw a card is a hard choice in this game. So you can either draw a card, or you can play a card or cards to a wall segment. And then you, again, after that, can draw a card or, again, play cards to a wall segment. So you could draw, you can draw play, you can play draw, or you can play twice. When you play cards to a wall segment, if you have matching cards in your hand, you can play any or all of those cards at one time. Otherwise, you can only play one card at a time. Okay? And that is your turn. That's what it looks like. Okay? So as I mentioned, after you've played your cards, if it comes back around to you and nobody has exceeded you in strength at a wall segment, you will get a victory point chit at that location. What's interesting about that is that chit gets placed onto one of your cards, and then that subtracts from your strength for that segment. Because remember, there's one more chit there. Mm-hmm. So let's say I have a strength of 5, and the next closest person has a strength of 4. It comes back to my turn. I'm winning that wall. I take the 3-point chit, and now my strength goes from 5 down to 2. And so the other person who was competing with me, or people, will be ahead of me now at that point. Did I say something funny?
No, it's just every time you say chit,
yeah,
it
becomes
becomes
really
more difficult to understand the word you're saying is chit. Chit.
Get a chit pool.
This is a family-friendly podcast.
What was that we were talking about when we were laughing about? Oh, yeah, when we reviewed Burgoo, we were talking about pulling onion chits.
Yep.
Oh, good times.
It happens every time. It's an audio format, and it's, it happens.
Hidden Gems Classic. Okay, yeah, so that's how the points work, basically. Yeah. So now let's talk about the cards. All right, so this is interesting. All right, so in everybody's deck, they have 7 1-value cards. So these are the weakest cards strength-wise, and they just count for 1, but there are 7 of them. It's the most numerous card in your deck. So if you have a hand of 5 cards and 4 of them are 1s, you could lay all 4 of those 1s onto one segment of the wall. So they're not without their usefulness, okay? You have 3 gates, which are of a value 2 influence for control of a wall segment. And then everybody has 1 watchtower, which is a 3-value card, which exerts 3 points of influence on a wall segment. Everybody has 5 infantry cards in their deck, and the way these work is by themselves they're just worth 1 point of influence. However, if you play them together as like sets, they compound with each other. Okay? So if I played 3 infantry cards to a wall segment, the first one would count for 1, the second one would count for 2, and the third would count to 3. If I added a fourth, then the fourth one would be worth 4. So you can see they get stronger as you play more of them to a segment. The cavalry, there are 2 of these in your deck. This is an interesting card. It's worth 2 points of influence, and it has a special ability in that you can play it and it doesn't count as your action. It's like a bonus action where you can really jump on somebody in an area and put a lot of points of influence down really fast.
Yeah. This is the horse.
That's the horse. Yep. And then the last 2 cards, boy, these are zingers right here, folks. Okay. The noble and the dragon. So if you play the noble, he in and of himself is only worth 1 point of influence. But what he does is he turns every card in that row, yours included, and any opponents that are in that row, makes that value of that card worth 1. All cards are 1, regardless of abilities or strengths or whatever.
So it's just total sheer quantity.
Yep. It's just quantity of cards at that point. But again, every player only has 1 of these each. This is a card you will track.
What does the dragon do?
The dragon, again, each player only has 1 of these. You play the dragon on top of any card, and it negates that card. So you could play it on top of somebody's noble, and now all the cards are what they were worth again before. Or you could play it on top of a watchtower, going from 3 to 0. Things like that. All kinds of shenanigans.
Yeah.
So basically, we'll go around and around like that until somebody runs out of cards, or every chit has been claimed. Every chit has been claimed. Once that happens, everybody else gets 1 more turn. And then we'll evaluate the walls 1 more time for majorities, and then whoever has the most victory point chits wins.
Tokens? Should we just say tokens?
Tokens. I can't help myself. Wins the game. And that's generally how you play Great Wall of China.
Cool. Well done.
Thank you. All right. Question. Does Great Wall of China play in 30 minutes or less?
That's a great question.
It is a good question.
Could you play it in 30 minutes or less? Maybe. Maybe if you're like pretty familiar with how to play.
And your group plays fast.
Yeah. But I think it's important to note that unlike cities, when it's time to play, like it's your turn.
Right.
Everyone else is waiting, right? So it's more turn-based. And it's not, and this is the reason I think that it would probably take potentially longer, is like Chris mentioned in the rules, it's not obvious what order you should do the things that you should do on your turn, or what you should do, and particularly
or where you should do it.
Correct. Yeah. And particularly because it can change depending on what the person before you just did, right? Because it's a constantly changing board, and you're sitting there evaluating like, okay, could I take the majority in that one? Should I invest in this, section of wall? Should I try to go for a section that's sort of uncontested?
Yes. Or kind of not worth a lot. Maybe I won't run up against somebody.
Should I intentionally just go for second because no one else is going for second in that column type of thing?
Right.
And there's a lot more questions to consider, and your hand changes depending on if you're drawing cards. It changes from round to round, and so it changes in strength. So maybe you have weaker cards, this time around, and you've used your more your heavy hitting cards, or maybe you just drew a heavier hitting card in the previous round, and now it's time to use that one or whatever.
Right.
Like,
or should I draw again and make sure I've got the firepower I need?
Exactly. Right. There's just a lot of different things to consider, and that can slow your play down, and that can slow the whole game down if you're playing with people who are skilled.
Yeah. Yeah. This is just classic Knizia. I love this about the man. He's so good at this. This game is so simple to understand. I mean, it's a step up from cities for sure, but I wouldn't play this with like my aunts or anything, but
maybe if you got some good,
if they
sharp ants,
if they, enjoy this, none of them do enjoy these kind of games, but what I'm saying is it's not hard.
Right.
But you will think hard at times in this game, because while the choices are simple, do I play a card? Do I draw a card? The choice of where to play, where do I want to get involved? Do I want to fight with this person or people for this chip? Do I just want to try to shore my hand up a little more? Because that's a big thing. I think the card draw element here is really fascinating because
it costs you something.
Well, it's your action.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, you're taking time, right? So if you get a big hand of cards, you have more ammunition, so to speak, to reinforce yourself if somebody challenges you. But the thing that you have to understand, like Cameron, you just said, if you're drawing cards, you're not doing anything on the board. So you're not being involved. And by extension, you may be giving other people something much easier, right? If I'm just drawing and I'm not fighting with other people, somebody might be pulling up a 4-point chit uncontested. Right? So you're constantly doing that like give and take of, oh, should I try to get in the mix here and try to fight with this person, or do I just draw again? Right? And then I think we have to go here because this is like a big part of the game, right? I
think I know where you're about to go.
Yeah, these high point value chips with a crappy second place point value. Let's say it's first place 7 points, second place 2 points, right? And you get into a tussle with somebody. Then you start to play the game. So this is what
everyone gets pot committed,
right? So this is what gamers refer to as sunk cost fallacy. And in a lot of ways, Great Wall of China is sunk cost fallacy, the game.
Right.
Because you'll get into a situation where you're looking at the other guy and we're like, we just can't keep doing this to each other. Like it's like mutually assured destruction. But if you're playing with Bill, he's like, I'm not stopping. You're going to have to stop. And if you keep playing to a spot and exhausting your cards, and then you come out on the short end of that stick and you end up getting the 2 instead of the 7, you've killed yourself. Right? But if you're afraid to get in those mixes and you just give somebody that 7-point chip easily, that's a huge gift, right? So I've said a lot there, and I want to let you interject, but I just wanted to lay out those scenarios because I find them fascinating from a design standpoint, and they lend to really hard choices, right?
I mean, I think that the thing that comes to mind for me when I'm thinking about this is the tendency for situations to come up, especially with turn order, where it's like, I'm not going to do anything about it, but you can't let that guy do that. Right.
You're not going to let him have that uncontested, are you?
Seriously going to just let him just get away with that? It's like, I know you're only going to get the 2, but like, you can't just let him. Haven't you been counting how many points he's already gotten? He's way ahead of everybody else. And it's like, who's actually calculating all that stuff? But I mean, it is possible. Like if you had a really sharp brain, you could count and like have a decent track of where everyone's actually at and who's really in the lead. I'm not able to do that, so I just have vague ideas of where people are. And speaking of which, I actually thought I was doing like super great when I was playing this game. I thought I was in the lead and everyone kept talking like I had like some, crazy lead, and I didn't win.
But you did what? You were close.
I mean, I think it turned out that I was actually in like second or something like that. But I thought I was like way ahead because everyone was like, "Oh, you got to do something about Cameron, and he's over there, racking things up." Whatever.
I feel like we were saying that about all of us.
The most fun was that I was just kept going after Ken. And we kept getting into fights together. I was like, dude, it's not intentional. It's just we're going after the same things, and I'm winning. So
it is. I will say. Maybe it's not as fun when it's happening to you. Maybe it is depending on your personality, but it's really funny seeing two people just going back and forth with each other over a really high point shit. Because one, they really want it, and two, they just don't want the leftovers, right? They're like, dang it, come hell or high water, I'm winning this thing, and I'm not backing out. And the other person's like, I'm not backing out either. And it just comes like this territory war, and it's just like I'm sitting back with my popcorn watching this unfold.
Right. While at the same time you're over there pulling over a free 4 value token.
Right. Okay, I'm just going to jump on this 4 that nobody cares about and rake that in, which I was trying to do a lot of that. I didn't win though.
Right.
But in that particular game, but it is just, it's a good decision. Again, it's that sunk cost fallacy dilemma of figuring out, do I just need to give it up? Right. Is the writing on the wall? Am I seeing that do I keep just fighting with this guy and making us both play cards, and I'm still going to come out on the short end of the stick? When do I stop here and start to invest in other places and just let him have it? Or when do I dig in and be like, no, I think I can take this. Right. It's just a fun back and forth, I think.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, how there are scenarios sometimes because there's, I think, how many lanes are there? Is it like 5
It depends
or 6?
on player count.
Okay.
But in a 4 to 5 player game, it's 4 lanes,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
But yeah, there will be situations where like there's a couple that are being sort of, that are contested. There's, hot battles going on. You're like, you're not going to make it a 3-way, battle.
Although that did happen sometimes.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Some people got in 3-way fights over some stuff.
But there are times when it's just like, okay, there's just one person on, this lane. There's a couple, point tokens on the table, and it's worth it to just be like, well, no one else is in there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
looks
sure,
like 3
it's
points
just a
to me.
3, but
It's not a lot.
I'm not even going to try to like take, but just by plopping a 1 in there,
Yep.
I could be picking up points. And then you do, because by the time it comes back around, the person that was, going after the 5 token to begin with gets their 5 token. And then everyone else is like, well, it's only 3. Like, I'm not going to jump in there and go after Cameron. He's already got 2 on the board and whatever.
Although it feels so bad. You're like, am I going to, he's going to get that with a 1 card, a 1 point card. Should I fight him for it? But then I'm like, am I really going to get in a fighting match over 2 or 3 points?
Why don't I just wait until the new tokens get
Right.
drawn and just go after whatever's there, whatever. Keep my cards all fresh. Maybe I'll just pass and just draw this round or something like that. And that's where all that decision making comes in.
Yeah. Dilemmas abound, right?
Yeah, I enjoyed that process.
Yeah, I did too. It was angsty and at times uncomfortable.
It's like what you want from a Knizia game. I actually didn't know that this was around a Knizia until I was just looking at the back of this box right here.
yeah. It's angsty and uncomfortable at times, but it's some really just clever design, I think.
Yeah.
And I think we have to talk a little bit about the cards too. I mean, there's some real zingers in here. The fact that you can throw your 3-value watchtower down and a couple of cavalry and be like, I've got 7 points of influence on the 7-point shit. What are you going to do about it? And then somebody nobles you and you go from 7 points down to 3 points.
It's wild.
You talk about a zinger.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can just get wrecked in this game.
Yeah.
Right?
Or like the warrior things too. I mean, if we're talking about the value of those cards, when you stack them up and they start, because they multiply, right? It's like it's like 2 is worth 3. 2 is worth 2.
1 is worth 1. The second one is worth 2. The third one is worth 3.
Individually. Right? So your total, right? So by the time you place the second one, your total value for those cards is 3.
Right.
When you place the third one, your total value is worth 6.
Right.
Yeah. So and that's powerful because you're getting 6 out of only 3 cards.
Yeah. Unless somebody nobles you.
Yeah. There's always a risk.
There's always that risk, right? Or somebody
for
dragons
that matter, if
you.
someone dragons, puts one of the dragons on there.
So I do like games. They're only, I mean, they all have their own usefulness and power, but I did feel like we were all kind of like, okay, has Cameron played his dragon yet?
Right.
Has Bill played his noble yet? Yeah. And you're tracking that because if you get in a tussle with somebody, you need to understand what is still in their deck. Now, just because it's still in their deck, it may not be in their hand yet.
Right.
Right? So you can take a chance and be like, well, I know Bill hasn't played his dragon yet, but he's still got like 10 cards in his deck. Maybe he hasn't drawn it yet.
Right.
Do I even want to risk it and just kind of go for it here? And so you're just kind of playing those mind games, right?
Yeah. It was fun. That is an enjoyable thing to try. And it's not like too much card counting, right?
No, it's just 20 cards. Yeah.
Right. Anything that we didn't like about it?
Let's see. Yeah, so one thing that I'll mention, I didn't talk a whole lot about the end of the game, but I do want to reiterate that the game will most likely end when somebody runs out of cards. And it's important to understand that these victory point tokens are pulled at random, okay? And they have varying distributions. And in one of our games we played, it just so happened that at the very end of the game, once I was out of cards, actually, I think I triggered the end of the game, 2 7-point chips came out on the same location.
Yeah.
That's randomness. That's games. I get it. But it was a little bit deflating to know that I couldn't go there, and the 2 people that were going to go there were both going to get 7 points. I was just like, oh, God, are you kidding me? And that ended up deciding the game. Mm-hmm. You could argue that's fluky, and it was, because there aren't a lot of 7s. It just happened that 2 7s got drawn at the very end of the game in the same spot.
Right.
But a 7 and a 6 could come out in the same spot, or a 7 and a 5 even. And you may not even be able to be involved there. And that could decide the game, right? So there's a little bit of in-game randomness that it could just happen.
Yeah.
You know, you just need to know that and just be okay with it, especially if you come up on the short end of the stick of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and interestingly, like I feel like that almost. I'm not negating what you're saying because I do think it's a valid concern, but there is this other element of like you kind of just have to watch out for it in terms of how you play, which is you do have this opportunity throughout the game to play multiple of the same card at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think the risk of that is you could
through your deck.
Be milling yourself out ahead of other players because not everyone is going to do that.
Valid. Yeah.
So
it's a good point.
It's just a tricky thing. It's like, it's a cool boon in terms of an option to play if it could be a strong move if you happen to have the same cards in your hand to be able to drop them all at once, and that's a power move, right?
Yeah.
And it could get you a lot of points that you need at the right moment, but there is a risk associated with it because you could be in a position to not be able to play at the later parts of the game.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that because there's this also angstiness in a lot of games, this one included, where it's like, do I throw a lot of cards down and guarantee my victory? Mm-hmm. But what you really want to do is you want to win with as few cards as possible.
Yeah, it's like an efficiency thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're kind of incentivized to not do that. But if you don't lay down a lot of cards, you're kind of inviting somebody to challenge you.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, there's a balance there, right? Of like trying not to mill your deck, like you said. And I did. I put myself in a position in that game where I went really hard in a lot of places, ran out of cards, and then some really good chips came out at the end, and I just couldn't compete for them because I had no cards. Right.
Yeah.
What about you, man? Was there anything you didn't care for in this game?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it kind of hit some of those same notes of like the length of the game was not too long.
No. Like for us, it wasn't 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think for some groups it could be. We were just agonizing over choices in this game, honestly.
Yeah. Not really. Yeah, I guess I don't really have any like sort of glaring cons.
Yeah.
Does that mean we should go ahead and do final thoughts?
Let's do it. I think you get to start.
Yeah,
this time.
I'll start this time. So yeah, for me on this one, when I reflect on it, like I found myself having fun playing this one. It had just enough of that competitive take that sort of feel to make it fun for the group, if I remember correctly, and like everyone was being lighthearted about kind of getting whacked every once in a while with
that's just
some
what
competition
it is, right?
over these things, and because the scoring is concealed, right? Once you pick up your tokens, you turn them over and put them in front of you, so all you know is like how many tokens each player has. I thought that was good, and it left a little bit of mystery because you don't know if they're holding a 2 or a 7 under there, like,
right.
And like again, unless you have like perfect memory, which who does? My memory's horrific. So, but the feeling that I remember having in our plays was it was just kind of fun. It was like, oh, just wait till it's my turn, like that kind of feeling. And it's like, oh, what are you gonna do to me? I'm exposed. I want these points, but you're gonna try to take them away from me. Like that's fun.
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, it kind of hits those notes again. It's like this kind of low investment game. Again, I think this one, it might be easier to learn than Cities.
Well, it doesn't have nearly as complicated scoring.
Right. And
the scoring is easy.
There's a couple of decisions like that's Knizia for you, right?
Totally.
It's like
it's
like you're gonna play this game. You're gonna make 2 decisions every turn. Maybe one. Right. Because sometimes drawing a card is not a decision, right? Eventually you can get just low on cards. It's like, I have 3 cards and none of them are going to work. So I'm going to draw. It was fun.
Yeah.
So, and it's almost a no brainer when you got a game that I come home from games and it's the next morning and my wife's like, how's games? And I'm like, I've had a blast.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, if I had a blast, that's at least a 4.
Right. Sure.
So yeah, I'm going to go with a 4 for this one as well.
Nice.
It's a good one.
Good. Nice. Not quite a 5, huh?
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I guess if I had to constrict my rating just for these filler length style games, like probably is in that 5 territory among filler games.
Among fillers, but just overall.
But overall, I think I'm comfortable with it at a 4.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, man, I struggled with this one. I went back and forth in my mind between a 4 and a 5, and I'll just go ahead and say right now, I think this game is deserving of a 5. Similar to, I think, you. We may have different reasons for why we're not getting there, because I'm not giving it a 5 either. And this is why. I'm going to try to explain this as best as I can. I think in the past, on the show, I've been very guilty of probably overrating games because I fell in love with the cleverness of the mechanism. But personally, I don't love the game as much as I think that I do. I think a good example of this, and this is ridiculous because this game's in my top 100 and I love this game, but Ponzi Scheme would be a good example.
Okay.
This game is in my top 100 games of all time. I haven't talked about it yet, so it's high.
I thought you gave Ponzi Scheme a 6.
I did.
Yeah.
But I think in retrospect, I should probably give it a 5.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that I'm not always in the mood to play Ponzi Scheme. Because Ponzi Scheme stresses me out.
Yeah.
And it stresses people out, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for me, I have to be in the mood to play Ponzi Scheme because it just is stressful, right? But it's so freaking cool as a design.
Yeah.
Like the design of Ponzi Scheme blows my mind. Still, we played it not long ago and I was like, this game is awesome. It's just so neat. But like yesterday, if somebody was like, we played games and they're like, do you want to play Ponzi Scheme? I'd be like, I don't know. You know?
Yeah.
And
it's
I think
like,
this
do I
game
want to
is-
raise everyone at the table's cortisol levels?
Right.
Like,
And I think this game is really similar. There would be some nights where I'd be like, yeah, let's play. And there'd be some nights I'd be like, no.
yeah.
Because this game, with that sunk cost fallacy thing, if you get into a pissing match basically with somebody over a wall segment and you come out on the short of the stick, it doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
Right? And you're thinking, I just should have got out earlier. I knew I wasn't going to get it. I didn't give in. Or now I got this crappy 2-point chip and I've used like 8 of my good cards. And you're just like, and that's not bad.
Yeah.
But I just have to be in the mood for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And some days I am, some days I'm not. So from a design standpoint, I think this game is brilliant, as most of his games are. I think a lot of people really like this game. I really like this game. But I'm going to settle on a 4 based on my personality
Yeah.
and what I know that I like.
Okay.
Right? And so I'm also going to give it a 4, but I'm glad I own it. I think it's a cool game.
No, I feel that. I definitely feel like, because we were talking about this recently, I think, about hoity-toity
Yeah.
and how like you can get Raiders
Swept up in
Raiders remorse,
Right, yeah.
Where it's like, oh, I think this is cool. Like, I think I like the idea of this thing, but practically speaking, can I realistically rate a game this highly when I'm not actually going to play it as often as my rating would suggest?
A 5 or a 6 should be like, a 6 especially, should be a game that I'll like always want to play no matter what.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But it's so hard not to get swept up in like cleverness and be like, God, this is just such a cool idea. It has to be this score, right?
Yeah. I mean, literally, like, I think that's such a great way to think about it too, because like, for example, I feel like this actually holds true in our group. Like, anytime that we don't have a game, let's say that we have to play, or we don't have a ton of time, pretty much in our group, if we say had like 45 minutes, be like, let's just play a few hands to teach you.
Yep.
And
every time
we'll all agree of that. And if there's only 3 of us, it's like, you want to play Haggis?
Right.
Like, we would do that, right? Even if we can't play a whole game.
Right.
Because it's just fun to play a couple hands.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying, where it's like, no, you kind of do need to actually want to play, to
gotta
get
be in the
those
right
games
headspace for this
played.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for that matter, when a game has like this game, it's fair enough to say like has some take that.
Oh, 100%.
You have to have a group that can take people getting after you. Like we've played with some people in the past. I'm not going to name names, but who don't handle it well when someone comes after them, right? Or when let's say they lose hit points, right? Like,
I think I know who you're talking about.
Everyone knows who that person is in their group, and they're just like, I come to game night and I don't want you to whack me and ding me with stuff. And it's not fun for them. You don't want to have a person that comes to your game table and then leaves going like, well, that hour and a half that we were playing a game and everyone was just ganging up on me the whole time, and they feel bad. And you're like, well, I don't want someone to come on my house and leave and not have had a good time.
Right.
So, no, I get that. I think that's a really valid thing to factor into a rating.
Yeah, nice. Well, if we piqued your interest, and I hope we have, I've got good news yet again. This game, despite how old it is pretty available. So there are copies of this game available at Noble Knight. Again, our sponsors for pretty cheap. Again, our discount code, SummerGems24. You can get 10% off of your order. And there are also 20 copies on the BGG Marketplace, I think for like as low as $6.
Wow.
I mean, this is a small box game. And again, you know, we would love it if you'd use Noble Knight because they're our sponsor and they're really cheap on there and you get the discount. But this game's just affordable, basically. So if you want to give it a try, if you've not tried out this Knizia, especially if you're a Knizia fan, I think you got to give this one a go. Cool. I think this one's overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not a lot of people talk about this one.
Yeah. That's what our podcast is about.
That's what we're about, man. That's why we exist.
Underappreciated.
Exactly.
Yeah. Unusual. Forgotten. All right.
All right. Well, those are our thoughts on Great Wall of China.
Nyet is trick-taking card game in which your teammates trump color and points earned change each round based on what you and the other players don't choose. Play your best cards, guess your opponent's game, form masterful block with teammates, and win coldest of wars. Accessible and clever, Nyet will delight fans of classic card games and beguile players looking for something new. Nyet.
That's so good. Oh, nailed it. Well done. I don't know what else to say. Maybe I shouldn't say anything.
It's a pretty complete assessment.
That's very good. Nyet. You ready for this? Published in 1997.
Oh my gosh.
What grade were you in?
Bro, 1997? Like 6th grade?
Really, I was a sophomore in high school. Racing motocross. Published by Yellow, most recently. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 1,929. Designer, we love him around here.
Yeah.
Stefan Dora. Did a whole episode on him. Next episode, we're doing a whole episode on him. Get ready.
He's been making games since before I knew what Russia was.
Yes, that's right. He's incredible. All right. Brief rule summary for Nyet. So Nyet is a trick-taking card game that takes place in 2 phases. We have the Nyet phase, and then we have the card-playing phase. I think it makes the most sense to start with the trick-taking phase and explain how that works, and then we'll go back and talk about the Nyet phase at the end. But just understand that the Nyet phase of the game happens before cards are played each round, okay? So Nyet, as I mentioned, is a trick-taking card game, and this one follows pretty standard conventions, okay? So in this game, we have 4 suits. Each suit is numbered 1 to 13, but there is a catch here that in each suit, there are 3 1s in each color. So those 1s obviously are the weakest cards, while the 13s are the strongest. However, it is likely, not guaranteed, but likely, that some of those 1s might be something we refer to as super trumps. Okay, more on that later. Okay, but basically the way this works is that the player who has the lead will play a card to the table. The next player is in line. If you have that color of card, you must also play that color. That's known as following suit. If you don't have a card of that color, you do not have to follow suit, and then you can play offsuit, and that includes playing trump. And you will have trump color in this game. I'll talk about how that's determined in a second. And basically, trump cards are the strongest cards, and only trumps can be beaten by higher trumps if they're played to a trick. And the highest cards, again, are the super trumps, and we'll talk about those more in a minute when we get to the Nyet phase. When you catch a trick, it will be worth a certain number of points, but there's one other catch. Remember I mentioned that every suit has 3 1s? If your team, again, this is a partnership game. I'll talk about that in a minute too with the Nyet phase. If your team catches a 1 in a trick and it came from a player on the opposing team, that card also counts for points. That's known as loot. You're catching loot, okay? And that's good if you can do that, catching ones that your opponents are forced to throw into tricks, okay? But that's basically the trick taking. Trick taking is pretty straightforward. So where does Nyet get interesting? Well, the whole emphasis of the game is on the Nyet phase, and it takes place on this little board. So before any cards are played, players in turn order, okay, are going to be placing chips on this board that determine the parameters of the game, okay, or of the hand, okay? And it will change from hand to hand or round to round. So let's just go through them one at a time here. So one of the things that you can influence is what is the trump color going to be for the hand. So on this board, every trump color is represented, and let's say it's my turn. If I play a chit on the red color on that board, what I am saying, and this is important to understand, is that red will not be trump for this hand. I'm nyetting.
It will nyet.
So the way that works is that once every color in the trump row is covered, except for one, that will determine it. So if 3 of the 4 spaces are covered and green is left showing, green is trump for this hand. Likewise, the super trumps are also represented, and whichever color of one does not get covered up, those are the ones that will become the super trumps. And again, those are the strongest cards in the game. Row 3. This is an interesting one. Points. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, and -2. So what this determines is whichever one of these numbers is not covered up, that's how many points each trick and each loot card will be worth that hand. Very important. And I will emphasize that there's a -2 here where tricks and loot cards caught can actually lose you points. Okay. And then the last 2 rows, while are also interesting, but quite a bit different. One is the discard row. What is left showing will discard how many cards, 1 or 2 cards, can be discarded from players' hands. And they're like, if you are able to discard ones or not, things like that. And then lastly, and this one can be really important at times, is determining the first player. So you will play chips on this board and say, okay, Cameron is not going to be first player this round, or Jason is not going to be first player this round if I cover them up. Whoever is left showing will be first player, and this is important for 2 reasons. One, they lead the first trick, but even more importantly, the first player chooses who their partner is going to be for this hand. Okay? Very, very important to understand that. Okay? That's generally how you play Nyet. You do that phase, the parameters will be set by the players, then you'll play out the hand. You'll do that with every player dealing twice, and then at the end of those rounds, most likely this will be a 4-player game. 8 rounds of play, whoever has the most points wins the game. All right, Cameron. Does Nyet play in 30 minutes or less?
No.
Yet.
Nyet.
Not even close, right?
I mean, no. I think we did a little calculations and we've proven that it's mathematically unlikely.
I would argue impossible.
Probably.
I mean, if you were trying to prove somebody wrong, sure you could. But in normal circumstances, this game is not coming in at under 30 minutes.
It's not coming in.
Yeah. No freaking way. I mean, we weren't even close.
No.
And just for example, let's say on the Nyet phase when we're putting the chips down, in most groups, I would say best case scenario, you're getting all the chips down and establishing the parameters in probably 2 minutes. If you're playing 8 rounds, that's 16 minutes. If you get them down in 3 minutes, that's 24 minutes. That leaves you like 10 to 15 minutes to play 8 hands of tricks.
Yeah.
There's just no way. This game is well over an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a longer trick-taking game. 30 minutes, that's a lie.
Now, is that fine? We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
But it's a bold claim.
Yeah.
And it's one that, at least from our perspective, is pretty unfounded.
Yeah.
And that's coming from a group of people who love trick-taking games. That's why about every other episode we're reviewing another trick-taking game.
A personal favorite of yours.
Sure.
You love them.
I mean, I absolutely. The genre is one of my favorites for sure. I'm always interested anytime it's like, hey, it's a trick taker. I'm like, sweet, sign me up, I'll play.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, all right, so what's interesting about this game, if anything,
Yep.
and what did we think of it since it failed the 30 minutes or less claim? I feel like the thing that we have to talk about next, well, and you tell me, like maybe we save it for later. So there's this Nyet board, which is got a lot going on. There's a lot of decisions there, and then there's the like, all right, how do you play your cards out, right? What's unique about that?
Sure.
Versus other trick takers.
I mean, I think the Nyet board, right, that's the hook, right? I think that's the
better
great
part
place
of the game,
to start.
sure.
So, yeah, what do you think about it?
So, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different decisions to make. There's an interesting thing going on in terms of the order in which you might prioritize the different things that you have to make decisions about covering up, right? You got a player order, you got whether you discard any cards and how many. You've got
trumps and super trumps,
and
then how many of the points,
and then how is it going to score,
right?
And so I think, man, I think there's so many. I have an order in my head. I wonder if it's the same order that you have in your head in terms of the priority of them, because I don't want to like say it, and I feel like it's a risk in terms of like saying it for people that might play, because they might hear the review and then try to play the game, and then they're like, well, Chris and Cameron said that this is the order that you should prioritize these. I just would almost say this is the order that like they tend to be prioritized.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying.
Like,
I think so. You're talking about like trumps and super trumps being first.
Just like, what do you pick first? How do you go about determining what to play, right? There's this huge grid of things, and you have to make a choice of where you're going to play your token and what to cover up first so that it shapes the direction of how the hand's going to go. Because that's really where you're going from. You're looking at your hand of cards and you're going, how do I want to play this hand? What's going to be most beneficial to me and my partner?
Right.
Right. And so you're like, well, what do I need it to definitely not be?
That's the thing. That's interesting about this board is you can't control what is going to happen. You can lead it in a direction, but you can certainly control what's not going to happen.
It's like you're picking the lesser of 25 evils.
Yeah, right. So, and I think that's got pros and cons, and we'll come back to that. That's one thing Jason mentioned. But I will say the more that I played it, I feel like where I placed on the board and what I chose to influence was very much dependent on my hand. Mm-hmm. So there were some games certainly where like I was like, okay, I'm going to influence what the trump and the super trump is. And there were some hands where I didn't do it at all. I just ignored it. Yeah. Because
you were evenly balanced or something.
For various different reasons, right? Mm-hmm. So one of them might be, I know I have a really weak hand, right? So maybe I am placing more on the start player spaces. Well, why would I be doing that if I know I have a weak hand? Well, if I can make myself the start player, if I'm looking at like Jason and Jason's covering up the -2, he's covering up the 1, because the chips you place on the board, this is important, have your picture on them, your player picture. So you can look at the board and see where people have been influencing, and that can communicate to you the strength of their hand. Yeah. So while my hand might suck, if I'm detecting that Jason maybe has a good hand, if I can work myself in the first player, I'm going to choose Jason to be my partner.
Right.
Right? So while I do agree that Trump and Super Trump alterations or controls seem to be where a lot of people were going, I don't think that's universally true. I think depending on your hand and the circumstances, you may want to go other places to see other things happen, right? Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think like there were times when I was looking at my hand, I was almost going like, man, okay, I'm going to be able to make one play on like what Trump is not, and I'm looking at my hand going, okay, I have like 2 reds, right? I'm going to get offsuited on that real quick, hopefully, maybe instantly. Let's see.
If I can discard them, right?
I really need 2 things to happen, and anything else I can kind of just wing. I need red to not be Trump.
Right.
And I need to discard 2 cards, because if I can start the round like that, I know that I've got probably some trumps in my hand, and I know that I can discard the 2 reds that are in my hand and I start the round off suited. Right. And so from a trick taking perspective, you could be at least a pretty strong partner.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, I think we need to talk about the points thing because, if you're spending
Very
a lot
important.
of time trying to control that you have a strong hand, this happened to Jason one time and it was quite hilarious, honestly. It cost him the game. But I think we need to talk about it because I think it tainted his view of this game. And I can see where he's coming from, but I think it just emphasizes the point of how every row is important.
Yeah.
You could have a loaded hand, and he did. And I think all of us picked up on it pretty quick. And he was winning. And so we made all the tricks worth -2.
Yeah.
And it wrecked him, right?
I think it wrecked me too, because I think it was he and I were like contending
got
for the lead
partnered
back
up.
and forth. Well, we were like in the top 2, and it was like maybe he's going to win or maybe I'm going to win.
Right.
And then it ended up being a -2.
Yeah. So I think while it is important to be like, I could have a really good hand here, I'm going to try to get the trump colors I want and the super trumps. And if you could make that happen, but if you neglect determining what the points are, your really good hand could actually turn into a devastatingly bad hand.
Yeah.
And so then Jason was like, that sucks. And I'm like, I get it. I'm not poking fun at Jason, but in those moments you have to say, okay, instead of covering up green as being not trump, maybe I should just cover up the -2 to make sure I don't get screwed here.
So just make sure, yeah.
But you're doing that instead of something else, right? And that's where the hard choices come in, right? Of like trying to prioritize which of these can I not have happen to me?
Yeah.
Right?
There still is this other component of you have to play
The card play.
skillfully.
Yeah, totally.
Right? But yeah, this game is only unique because of this Nyet board. So yeah, no, I think you're right. It's this weighing of like what matters more.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, I think it's the major selling point. But I will say it's not all roses. So I guess it's a little, at least for me, it transfer into a con.
Sure.
Because, it's not perfect. So let's just give another scenario. Let's say, like in the Jason example, I recognize that Jason's got a really strong hand, right? I figured that out based on how he's placing on the board. And he's winning, and I want to try to pull him back. And I managed to make tricks worth -2. And I'm like, yes, got him. But then you end up being first player, Cameron, and you pick Bill to be your partner. Now I screwed myself, right? I did all that work to make tricks -2 because I knew it would hurt Jason, and then I end up being partnered with Jason.
Yeah.
Right? And that wasn't my fault, right?
Yeah.
That's just kind of how the board shook out because you do these manipulations in a turn order, right? So you can't make everything that you want to happen.
Yeah.
And so while I might have got what I wanted from the points, now I've partnered with Jason and I've hurt myself.
Right.
Right? And so those kind of things can happen in this game, and it's not super satisfying. The way the partnerships shift in this game, I can kind of see what he was trying to do, but it didn't always feel great. And specifically at the end of the game, too, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that was also an issue. But I don't know. What did you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, the scenario that is still tender, let's say, for me, is the reality of that partner shifting thing, which can result in, like, for example, in the game that I was referring to earlier, where it was Jason and I basically contending for the top spot. We're first and second. And then I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically it was like you forced us to be partners.
Yeah.
Somebody forced us to be partners.
I took the first player.
Right. Yeah. And you intentionally chose, I think whoever it was, Bill or somebody.
Yeah.
So that Jason and I had to be partners. Well, I was screwed at that point.
Because you were in second.
Because I was in second already. And so we're going to get the same number of points no matter what quantity of tricks we took. And so it was like, great. So I'm going to play this whole round. I'm locked in and I'm basically just sending.
I can't win.
Yeah, I'm sending Jason across the victory line. Like, that stinks.
It does. It's really important to understand that in this game, that when you get into the final round, if you're in last place, you can't win.
You can't win, yeah.
It is impossible for you to win.
Right.
Because you're going to be partnered with somebody
who's ahead of you.
That person will be ahead of you, and partners always score the same number of points. You can't win.
Right.
And like you said, Cameron, you were in second. But because you got partnered with the person in first, you couldn't win.
And it wasn't my choice. And I knew that, like, if Jason or I had the opportunity, the one thing that we wouldn't have done is choose each other.
Yeah.
Because that would have been dumb.
Right.
I mean, maybe Jason would have chosen me, but he would have had no incentive to.
And I can hear people out there saying, well, that makes the choosing of the first player in the last round really important. And it does. But again, remember, you can only choose who won't be.
Yeah.
You can't guarantee it will be you.
Right.
And when it's not you making the decision, you don't know whose team you're going to land on, right? And so I did find every time we played this, there were always people that were just really unhappy with how the game ended because of how they got partnered up. They couldn't win.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a problem.
Yeah.
And you could also say, well, just don't put yourself in that situation of being in last. But I mean, like you said, Cameron, you were in second and you couldn't win.
Yeah.
Just because of how you got partnered up.
Yeah, and you could have even like, because there's only 4 spots in the first row of the Nyet board, like you could be in a turn order situation where you can't even influence it at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that kind of stinks. It's tricky though, because like I do wonder, like, would the game be significantly different if you, let's say, just blocked off that whole line and said, we're not going to play with it. We're going to choose permanent partners and play the whole game.
Well, right. Yeah.
Would it be better? I don't know.
Yeah. It's taken away a decision space. But one of the nice things about partnership games like Teach You is you and I are partners. We're partners the whole game.
Right.
We win or lose together.
Right.
We can make a comeback.
Right.
Right. And yet you can't come back in the last round if you get partnered up in a not ideal way.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're playing that last round out and you're trying to do the best you can, obviously, but it just doesn't feel good to know you're eliminated before the game's over.
Yeah.
It's just not good.
Yeah.
It's just an inherent weakness of the design. That's all you can really say about it, right?
No, I feel that.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the board has good parts. There were parts that I like. There are parts that are not perfect, right? Left me feeling, like I wanted a little bit more, I guess.
I want to run back to this concept that you mentioned in the rules about the 1 cards.
Yeah.
We were talking about how the card play goes and how it's sort of just standard trick taking play. And like, this is a little bit of an exception to that, where you have these ones that are like, they're basically a liability.
They're liabilities,
right?
yeah.
So
if your partner doesn't catch them, the other team's getting points.
Right. So it's this other thing to think about. You have to figure out how to chuck them in when you're definitely winning the trick,
right?
Let's say.
And recognizing when that's happening.
Right.
Right.
Because they are a liability, because if you end up having to play them, for example, in tricks where you just have to follow suit, and it's the only card that you have because you've been waiting and holding out for this opportunity to get rid of it in the favorable scenario, then what happens is that your opponents get not 1 trick when they take that card, but 2.
Right.
And that sucks.
Especially if tricks are worth like 3 points per, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It
It's
can
awful.
just totally turn the game around, right?
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that as this other thing. I don't know if that it's necessarily a con. In fact, I think in terms of gameplay, I think it's actually a pro
I do too. Yeah.
because it made that stage a little bit more interesting. The deck is obviously different. It's not just there's only one, right? There's multiple of these. And so they're like landmines that are kind of sprinkled throughout the game. And it makes gameplay more interesting
I agree.
from trick to trick. So
figuring out what am I going to do with these?
Exactly. How am I going to manage them? And for that matter, when it comes to, you're looking at your handbook while you're choosing the things on the Nyet board. And so there were times when I was like, I really need to be discarding at least 1 card, if not 2. I really would rather do 2 because I have a bunch of ones.
Yeah.
And they're not super trumps.
Well,
right?
I was just getting ready to say, I'm glad you mentioned the board again, coming back to the board. I do feel like the discard row tended to be the most neglected one. It was just kind of like...
Man, I cared about it a lot.
Okay, so maybe I wasn't picking up on that because if I had a hand where I had no ones,
yeah,
I was like, okay, I want the spot where you can't discard ones. Because there's one that like,
Someone's
it's a
sitting there
discard,
with-
but it won't let you discard one.
Yeah.
Because my hope is I get partnered with somebody that doesn't have a lot of ones, and then that just gives me and my partner more potential to catch ones from somebody's got to be holding
Someone's
them,
stacked up, yeah.
right? And so I don't want them to discard them. I
Right.
want them to have them and have to figure out what the heck to do with them. Hopefully I don't get partnered with that person, right? Again, that's just, you won't know, but that's just another little nice addition to the board to make things work in a direction you might want them to go, right?
Yeah. Because they're pretty valuable. Like
they can be.
When you can force your opponent to have to throw in ones and
If
you're
they
just
have to
like
follow
taking
suit,
multiple tricks, like that's gold right there. Especially if you're playing a round that's worth more than 1 point per trick.
Right.
So I just wanted to throw that back out there because we
fair.
kind of glossed over it, but it is an important element of this game that's different from a lot of other trick takers.
Yeah, I totally agree. Final thoughts time?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Why don't you run with it?
All right, I'll start us off. So, as Cameron mentioned, we love trick takers around here. We play them a lot. They're just fun. They're really in vogue right now, and for good reason. I think more people are learning about them. I grew up playing them, but they're just really hot now. This one's an old one, though. I mean, 1997. And I will say, similar to Slough Off, which is also a door design that's older, this game is not perfect, okay? I do think that there are some unsatisfying outcomes that can happen on this board that I think we've outlined in the review. I'm not going to rehash them. However, I do think there's some really fun things that happen on this board too, and just trying to work things out to your advantage as best as you can, right? Making sure that some things don't happen that could ruin your day. You just have to think that. Like every time you place a chip, you're like, what do I really have to make sure doesn't happen here, right? And then just hope everything else works itself out in the wash, right? So, all that to say, again, I liked this game. I'm glad I have it. I enjoyed it. It's not perfect. It's not one of my favorite trick takers, but it's a good one. I'm going to give it a 4. I think it's fun. Fours across the board for me today. I mean, this is good. I liked it, and I'm glad I have it. I can tell you, Ken and Bill think that this game is unbelievable. I wouldn't be surprised if Bill has this way up on his top 100. And I'm saying that not because I think their opinions are wrong. I'm giving different viewpoints that there are people in our group who think this game is incredible. And again, I think it's very good. But there are just a couple of things about that Nyet board that I don't love, but I think it's still great. So I'm going to give it a 4.
All right. Very cool. So for me, like we said, I mean, we talk about a lot of trick takers. It's become probably my favorite genre of games to play. I'm always up for trying a new one, and this one was a pleasant surprise. I hadn't heard of it before, and one thing that we didn't mention is this print. I just looked at the box. This one was reprinted in 2015, and it's got like pretty good artwork.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's a nice design. Yeah. It's got the kind of like Cyrillic imitation font going on. Like it's got this sort of like Russian theme and whatnot. Yeah, it's like pretty nice. So like I'm probably going to pick this one up because I really liked it. Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. We played it many times.
We did.
In fact, and just prep for this, Chris was like, hey, do you need to play any of these anymore? I was like, I mean, I would play Nyet again, like if you just want to, Yeah. And we did, and it was great. We had a lot of fun with it. I think more favorable about this one because I just think that like a lot of what's going on with it is like just fun.
Yeah.
And man, it's just so important that I feel like it's more fun than it's complex. When I think about other trick takers that I've played, like Ghosts of Christmas, which we talked about and like all love, Ghosts of Christmas is way more complex than this game.
More.
And in terms of scoring and thinking and all the things you have to think about. Whereas like this is like almost about as straightforward of trick taking as you can get with this unique twist on it. And I think that's great. I think it's fantastic, actually. And so my rating on this is actually, I think, comfortably in the 5 range.
Nice.
It's been a while since I've given a game a 5, but I had so much fun with this one.
I like it, man.
And yes, did I even experience some of the unfortunate things that can happen with the way that the pairing partnership stuff goes? Like, but it's one of those things where like it didn't bug me as much as I thought it might.
Yeah.
When I thought about it, it was kind of like, I feel like this is the type of game that you can just go in and just have fun with it. And everyone's sort of feeling lighthearted about it. So I feel good about giving it a 5. I'm probably going to get a copy of it and show it to my friends. I just recently realized that some of my like pretty close friends are all actually like trick takers.
Oh, nice.
A lot more than I thought that they did because
this would be a good one.
Because they kind of like gave me squinting eyes and poo-poo eyes about trying to learn Tichu. I'm still working on them about that.
Tichu's way more complicated than this.
I learned that they really like a game that I'm going to talk about in the backstage episode. Woo-hoo! So
yes.
teaser
in your top 50.
So yeah, I'm comfortable giving it a 5, and like I enjoyed it and I recommend it.
Nice. Okay, well, I might have some bad news for you here, buddy.
Oh no.
While this game is not that old, this print run did do really well. There are no copies on Noble Knight. There are 4 copies on BGG, but they're high.
Okay.
For whatever reason, this game's gotten a little bit rare. You can certainly borrow my copy if you want, but I imagine this will get reprinted at some point.
Okay.
This game pushes the limits of, I think, what qualifies for our show. It is rated 1,929 on BGG, which is well outside the top 1,000, but people have heard of this game.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like Nyet. I've never heard of that. A lot of people have probably heard about this one. It's just older, and again, 1997. It's kind of fallen out of memory given the craze and trick takers to more modern design. So I think it was worthwhile. But all that to say, I wouldn't be surprised if they reprint this one at some point.
Okay.
But for now, it's a little bit hard to come by.
Yeah, it looks like this reprint is like close. It's like 9 years old, basically.
Yeah. It's time for another one.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Well, those are our thoughts on Nyet.
Nice.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Hidden Gems. If you like what we're doing here, please remember it's a huge help to us if you would leave us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice and follow us on our various social media accounts. These simple things can make a difference for the show's exposure so more folks can enjoy exploring games with us. Check out the BGG Guild if you want to interact with us or share a game that you think is a hidden gem. And if you're so inclined, please consider supporting the show over at patreon.com/Hidden Gems Podcast or purchasing a Hidden Gems t-shirt on our website at hiddengemsboardgamepodcast.com/store. Until next time, I'm your host, Cameron.
This is Chris.
And no one else is here. Thanks for listening.
This episode of Hidden Gems, number 67, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on September 15, 2024. Join us again in 3 weeks as we again take a closer look at the game design catalog of the great Stefan Dora. Will our 3 games up for review reach the heights of the fantastic Hellas or Medina? Or will they suck like Tongabanga? Tune in to find out. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our Board Game Geek Guild is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Ghidorah. Our Discord channel is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Snoozefest. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Caitlin Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at It's Caitlin Nieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and X at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we discussed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, guild number 3874. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search.